everybody. Welcome to My Counselor Live. Oh my goodness, I am just very excited for today's meeting because it is with one of our counselors here, Alison Pitts, who I love, and I am just so excited to get to chat with her today. I know she has some amazing, great insight to share with everybody, but we are so happy you're here, guys. Thank you so much for joining, whether you're watching us live right now or watching the replay. We are so happy to be able to interact with you in this way this year, especially where there is a pandemic and all of these things. You know, I'm so thankful that we have platforms like this to be able to interact still. So this is going to be awesome. And guys, if you have any questions, anything you'd like to see answered in a future video, feel free to comment that, inbox it, go to MyCounselor.Online/ask. But we are going to dive in. I'm Tori, and I am joined by Alison Pitts today. Alison, I would love for you to just take a minute and introduce yourself to the people watching.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Thank you, Tori. Yeah. So my name is Alison Pitts, and I've been a counselor here at MyCounselor.Online for about 2 years now. I love it. Love this company. I love working with people and just being with people during really difficult seasons of their life and being support and encouragement and a cheerleader on the sidelines as we kind of work through any and all of the things that people struggle with right now. I think especially like you were saying during this season, everything is it feels so much heavier. And now I think more than ever, people are realizing how important their mental health is. And I just am so honored to walk alongside people when they're struggling through stuff like that, because it's just so important. And I love my job. I love my job.
Yeah, I would love to know, how you got started with counseling. Did you always know that you wanted to do this?
Kind of. So it was the kind of thing where I would always just be that person that people overshared with. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was the barista at a coffee shop all throughout college, and people would just tell me their life stories while I was making them a latte, and I was like, I wonder if I could do this for a living. But then in college...
Were you studying that in college?
I was studying psychology.
Okay.
So it was related for sure. Like, I've always loved people. I've been fascinated by like just the complexity and the uniquenesses that we all bring to the table and how God's made us all. And just all of those things have always fascinated me. And then as I graduated college and had a psychology degree, I was like, I wonder how all these things fit together. So it was more of like just knowing who God made me to be and knowing like what I was passionate about and what I loved. And I loved people, and I loved being with people in the hard moments, and just really felt called to like make that a profession and make that like what I got to do 40 hours a week. And I just absolutely love it. It makes sense. It fits who God made me to be. And I'm so passionate about just helping people through the hard times.
Right. So. No, I love it when people do a job that they love, when it doesn't feel like work. Because for you, you're doing this 40 hours a week, you're counseling people, but like, it doesn't feel like a job to you because you just naturally are that person that people talk to. And I just love that. And I'm so happy that you're on this team. And I know that you have just transformed a lot of lives through your just listening ear and advice, and so good. And MyCounselor.Online, how did you find MCO, and how long have you been with MCO?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I actually found it on Indeed. Plug for Indeed.
Yes.
I was working at a different job that was just not a great fit. I wasn't very happy, and it was kind of a God thing. Like, I went on this vacation and was like, you know what, like, enough's enough. I really need to move on with just all the stuff that was going on there, and started praying. And within like 2 or 3 weeks, I found MCO, applied, and had a first interview. And so it really just felt like such a God thing that I was like, Lord, I need something new. And he was like, well, here it is. Like, here is this job. And it's ever since then just kind of knowing Josh's heart for the company and his heart for people, and wanting not only our clients to have an excellent experience where you can have like theologically informed clinical excellence is just so in line with my heartbeat for practice and for counseling and therapy, as well as Josh also caring about the company, also caring about the clinician's experience, that they want us to be whole and okay and well as clinicians so that we can provide the best possible experience for our clients. And that's just so amazing. Such an amazing and unique and beautiful company that I feel so honored to be a part of.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, you know, I think something significant about MCO is that they don't just take care of the clients, they take care of the clinicians, they take care of their staff and people that work for them, which I think is what makes the care that they give to other people so excellent, because, you know, we're taken care of and things like that. So yeah, MCO, amazing. I'm so happy that you're a part of us, and super excited to jump in. So we're going to start with our little first segment of My Counselor Live. So we get to chat through one of the articles that you wrote, Allison. So you wrote an article called Anger 101. Seems simple, really isn't, right? So if you wanted to jump in and tell us who this article was written to.
Yeah, of course. So I wanted to write this article on this topic, on anger specifically, just because I feel like, at least in my experience in the Christian church, it's not something that gets a lot of attention. It's something that we kind of like put into this bucket of, well, that's not bad. Like God says to not let the sun go down on your anger, right? Like,
right. And then that's like, okay, cool. That's it.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, I'm not supposed to be angry is kind of the takeaway. And so I really wanted to bust some of the myths around that, if you will, and just like bring it to the light, because I think it's something that we universally as humans experience. Anger is something that we all feel at different times and to different degrees. And so really trying to shed some light on that. For people who maybe feel like that's not okay, or if they struggle with anger and they have a hard time managing it, but feel like they can't really talk to people in the church about it because it's kind of one of those taboo topics that we're not always good at addressing. And so, yeah, just wanting to normalize the experience of anger for people and also shed light on just some different experiences within that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, you talk about it, I feel like you said, like it's not talked about a lot. And I think when it is, it's very simplified and kind of dumbed down. But it's much more complicated than that, right? So you talk about in your article that there are different kinds of anger, right? There's like a healthy anger and there's a not so healthy anger. So I wanted to know if you could just kind of talk through the differences, you know, what is a healthy anger, a God honoring anger, and what is just defensive anger and not healthy.
Yes, yeah, of course, which can feel really confusing in the moment, I think, for a lot of people, because when we're angry, we're just angry.
Right, where our emotions are like super heightened. It's hard to even like, I feel like when I get to a level of anger, it's hard for me to separate from like that emotion and go back to truth.
Yes.
Which is why it's so important to like know beforehand, before I ever get angry, like what is not okay.
Yes, yes. So first off, I think just as a disclaimer, before we get too in the weeds, I want to make sure we differentiate between anger and aggression, right? Like being angry and feeling angry, the emotion of anger is different from someone acting out in anger, right? So that would be like saying mean things, name calling, belittling, abusive language in any way. It can also be like physical aggression, right? Like hitting, throwing things, punching walls, like that kind of, that's not what we're talking about. That's aggression, right? And that is never okay, right? We never want to say, well, it's normal and okay for me to feel angry, and so it's okay that I'm acting in these ways. That's not what we're saying at all. Aggression and anger are two separate things. And so I just want that to be super clear out of the gate here, that I'm not excusing or making it okay that people act aggressively or violently. That is never okay, right? As Christians, we're called to love people well, even when we're experiencing big emotions like that.
Yeah, I love that you said that. That's good.
Yeah. And I think also too, like, it's important that we like take all the thoughts captive, right? And that we're in the driver's seat whenever we are feeling big emotions, which I think is why anger can be so hard to manage sometimes. Because like you were saying, Tori, like when we're in that space, it's like, it's hard to bring our minds back under control, right? When we're feeling really big emotions, the part of our brain that is in charge of that kind of starts going nuts. And then the part of our brain that's good at being rational and logical and like coherent kind of gets overwhelmed and leaves the party, right? Our prefrontal cortex disengages when our limbic brain gets too overwhelmed. And so, that's kind of nerd speak for saying like it's hard to think rationally when we're really, really angry, right? Or experiencing any emotion to a super big degree, right? So that's a big part of learning to manage your emotions, even in smaller moments, so that when bigger moments come, you kind of have those skills to rely on. So all that to say, when I like to think about kind of defensive anger and healthy anger. Defensive anger is usually directed at someone, right? Like if I feel angry, I'm angry at someone or something or a situation, right? Where I'm using it, going on the offensive instead of experiencing maybe a softer emotion that might be underneath that. So like in the article, I kind of like to think about defensive anger is like like the tip of the iceberg that you can see above the water, but there's a bunch of other stuff underneath the surface of the water that's like holding that thing up that we can't see.
Right. I was going to say like there's fear and sadness and hurt and all of those different things that are the root of why we get angry.
Yeah, in that defensive way, because those softer emotions, that hurt, that fear, that sadness feels so much more vulnerable and so much more scary. And so we don't want to go there because that's vulnerable, that's scary. If we go there, then we feel like we're open to any kind of attack or criticism. Like that's the whole point of vulnerability, right? Like Brene Brown talks about, where vulnerability is stepping out when we have no control over the outcome, right? And so if we say, hey, that really hurt me, that made me feel really sad when you said that, or when you did this, we're opening ourselves up to even more pain potentially, because that feels like we don't have control in that, right? And so sometimes anger can come in as a way to try to protect us from those feelings of vulnerability, right? It's a defense, something that we're using to protect that soft part of our hearts, right? When really what we're needing in that is connection, right? When we're feeling those softer emotions like sadness, fear, hurt, right? Even like disgust, like there's a lot of like, oh, I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. I don't know if I'm going to be cared for. I don't know if the person I need to confront with this is going to care about this, right? Or is even going to pay attention to this or value this, right? And so then we just get angry, and it feels a little bit safer, right? Because then I'm in control. I'm in the driver's seat. I can be angry at you. It's your fault, right?
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of conviction right now, because I know there are moments where I get angry, and I think of like my marriage and moments where I get angry at him, when in reality I have something that I'm not dealing with, that I need to deal with. And what, like you said, is more important in that moment is actually connecting with him, getting there, instead of just like blocking him off and being upset.
Yeah, making him the enemy instead of your partner.
Right. Yes. Because you're on the same team. Like,
exactly.
Right? Like, that's what a marriage should be. Like, you're on the same team, fighting for the same thing. And so, you know, I feel like it's going very against the design of marriage when we get angry and kind of make that person the enemy.
Exactly. Yeah. Because like biblically, you're one flesh, right? And so in a marriage, it's so easy to go there because we want to like protect those softer bits of our heart, right? And it's so scary, even in a covenant relationship, even in our marriage, to be vulnerable, right? Like you're talking about. And so it's tough to notice that. It's tough to put those things down, right? But like you said, you're on the same team. You guys are one flesh, according to scripture. And so if one person's getting torn down, you're both getting torn down, which is why like those things are so sacred and so important to protect against, right?
Yeah. So at the start of this, you were saying kind of the way that the church approaches, anger is sometimes not kind of oversimplified, and maybe just don't really get to the root of anger and all of that. So my question for you, and you talk a little bit about this in the article, but can you expand on what God says about anger?
Yeah. So it's interesting because like it's definitely in the Bible. God says to not let the sun go down while you're angry, right? It says like in your anger, do not sin, right? And so there is these spaces like that's the differentiation between anger and aggression. In that, at least that's how I understand and think about that verse, right? There's the difference between anger and aggression. Like being angry is normal and like I said, even sometimes healthy, right? Like the healthy anger teaches us to set boundaries. It lets us know when like something either in us or in someone we love is getting violated, right? Something's happening that's not okay. So anger comes up to say, hey, this isn't okay. We need to set a boundary here. And that's really helpful and really important, right? So we don't want to kind of write anger off as a bad thing, right? But then I think when the Bible talks about like, let the sun go down while you're angry, how I kind of interpret that is to not ignore or not process anger, right? We don't want to have that feeling when it comes up and then be like, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to feel this, and push it down and shove it aside and not actually process through it, not actually figure out like, where is this coming from? What's happening in my circumstance or what's happening inside of me that I need to pay attention to, right? Because that's something that emotions are. They're indicators, right? They give us information about stuff that's happening in our world. They're incredibly important, right? They have like an action tendency. We need to do something with them, right? And I think too, like thinking back to like what you asked, what does God say about anger? I think we have great biblical examples of God experiencing anger, right? Like in the Bible, the times that God gets angry are when his people worship other gods, right? Or when other cultures, other nations actually hurt the Israelites, right? And Jesus gets mad when people use the temple for like financial gain instead of worship, right? Like it's this space of like idolatry, putting other gods before the God, right? Before Jesus. That's what gets him angry because it's not right, And also when people hurt his kids, he gets angry because that's not right, right?
Yeah, I love that because I think we always go back to the Bible and examples of God or Jesus showing love or anything like that, which the anger can be a part of that too. But I think we always kind of skip over the passages and the parts that are like God angry because it's scary. Like we're like, oh my gosh, like that's someone you don't want to anger, right? So
yes, exactly.
But it's so important because it does set the precedent and the example for us to follow when it comes to those big, heavy emotions.
Yes. Like if you think about like so much the heart of the gospel is like taking care of the orphans and the widows in their distress, right? Like Jesus and God like give us a command to care for his people. And I think like the anger comes up. It's almost like what we kind of understand and call now social justice, right? Like those things aren't okay. And so we need to fight for kind of God's vision and God's desire. Like bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth as best we can now in a fallen world, right? So that anger lets us know when something's not right, or when someone needs an advocate, right? Or when something is coming in and taking the place of what should be God's role in our life, right?
Yeah,
An important red flag, flashing red light of like, something's not right here. Right?
So true, so true. And I think of, when God isn't the center of our life, and when we are idolizing other things, I mean, so much more of the anger and sin, that aggression or unhealthy anger like comes up in us.
Exactly. Yeah. It can be, I think, like anything, anger is one of those things like that I think the enemy is super good at twisting to use against us, right? Like emotion in a lot of respects and a lot of other contexts is a connecting thing. Like we feel something and it draws us to someone else, right? And I think anger is one of those things that the enemy has taken and twisted to make it divisive, right? When really its heart is like having healthy relationship, right? Yeah. Anger, even in a marriage, can be like, oh, hey, actually that wasn't okay. I'm noticing that made me really angry. And I think it's because like, this is a boundary that's really important to me, right? And so it's finding what God intended for good in it, right? And not letting the enemy twist it and make it something that divides, right? But instead something that can bring together in a way that's made healthier and stronger, because we're learning more about ourselves and we're learning more about God's heart for community and God's heart for relationship.
So good. So good. And, you said it, you've said it throughout, anger is a powerful emotion, and it's a big emotion, but there's so much underlying. And so it is important to process not just the anger, but everything that's beneath it, because you're not just getting angry, there's so much under that. So yeah, it's a huge emotion, and something that I know the enemy loves to use to divide people, to create tension in your spirit and all of these things. So practical tips, Alison, what are some practical tips for maybe avoiding that, defensive anger, and really just kind of following, I guess, what scripture says is healthy?
Yes. So I think first off, what I'll say is if anger is something that like anybody listening to this struggles with, because I think a lot of people do, the first thing that I'll say is to just remember to breathe, right? I know that sounds like basic, but it's basic because it's helpful, right? Just remember to breathe, because breathing tells your body that you're okay. And the more that your body starts to slow down and regulate itself, the less you'll feel that space of like your brain just not connecting, like that you're just reacting and responding, right? Like I was saying earlier, like that limbic brain, if you can calm it down, then the part of your brain that's good at being rational can kind of get back online and help you out. So breathing is a great way to just slow yourself down so you can get back into that regulated space where you're in the driver's seat and the anger isn't in the driver's seat.
I've literally never thought of that, but that is such a good practical tip for those moments.
Yes. And I think like, because it's so common, just remembering like breathing and caring for yourself. Like so much of this stuff, Tori, at least the way I think about it, like mental health and these things, I think can operate a lot like our physical health. I think we're all really good at like, oh, I need to take care of my body. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out, or I'm going to like do some yoga or go on a walk, right? Like we're really good at making those things daily practices. And I think as we're talking about anger and like regulating, managing, taking care of those things, I think we need to kind of incorporate some daily mental health practices into that as well, and emotional mental health stuff, right? Like having moments where we actually slow down and engage in some mindfulness, right? Even daily, just taking 1 minute to like think about, how am I feeling today? What's happening inside of me today? Because all we're doing in that is building a muscle of awareness.
Right. And we're catching that anger or, whatever could flare up before it does.
Yes. So it could be that, or it could be like you're just building the muscle of figuring out what's happening inside of you, so
Yeah.
that in these moments when things feel really big, it won't feel as mysterious or confusing or like, I don't know how I feel. I'm just mad. I'm just like upset. I'm just pissed off, whatever it is, right? We kind of do this thing of like, oh, I'm just mad. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't want to engage with that. I don't want to feel, I don't even know how to, and I'm mad. And so I'm not going to take the time to do it. Right. But if we're engaging with kind of what's happening inside of us on a regular basis, then it won't feel as foreign when like the stakes are higher, I guess, you know?
Yeah, no, that's so good. So, so good. Do you have any other, tips that you would suggest to anybody who maybe struggles with, this kind of emotion?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I would encourage breath, right? Engage in mindfulness regularly, and then know also when to separate yourself if you're getting to that place. Or I've had some clients call it like a red out, like some people black out, right? But when anger gets so big and you're seeing red is what they call it, like know when to take a time out and separate yourself, and that's okay. That if in the moment you're finding it hard to manage that, that's okay. Know when to remove yourself so that you can give yourself the space to process it. I think that's another thing that anger kind of gets in the way of. It cuts off that process, that we don't give ourselves the space to understand because we're just overwhelmed in the moment, right? So learning to take just a time out in those spaces when you're feeling super angry, calm down, ask yourself a couple questions of like, where is this coming from, right? Is there a boundary here that I need to set, or is there something softer that I'm trying to protect, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you so, so much for just expanding on so much of that. I know that, this resonates with all of us, really. I think this is something that all of us should read, all of us should reflect on. And I appreciate just all of your tips, and yeah, glad that you wrote that because I think that it's important to talk about. So with that, we are going to jump into our next topic of conversation. We're going to talk about the Enneagram today, the Enneagram of personality, which I feel like this is more of maybe a millennial thing that has been in the past few years kind of flared up as a big thing. And what the Enneagram is, kind of, how you can figure out, what your type of your number is, and then also just kind of like how it helps, how does knowing this self-awareness help, so we're going to jump in, and Allison, I'm just going to start by asking you if you can kind of just explain what the Enneagram is.
Yes, yeah, of course. So it's a personality assessment, right? So it's something that, like, I know a lot of people are familiar with, like Myers-Briggs personality and like a DISC assessment. Like, there's a million different types of personality assessments out there. And so the Enneagram is just another one of those personality assessments that I think are super fun. I love them. I don't know if that's just because I'm a psychology nerd, but
oh no, I'm not a psychology nerd, but I do love just self-awareness. Like, I love having the awareness to know my reactions to things and all of that.
Exactly. Yes. So I think what I love about the Enneagram is there's 9 types, and the way that they describe the types is that, like, each type has like strengths and weaknesses. And I think a lot of times with some personality assessments, we have a tendency to say, well, this personality type is better than this personality type, or, oh, I hate that I'm this personality type, right? We kind of make judgments about the goodness or badness of each of our bucket that we fall into, right? But the Enneagram, I think, is really, really good at saying, like, if you're healthy, this is what it looks like to be in that type. Or if you're like kind of in the middle, this is what it looks like to be in that type. Or if
I think that's something that I really appreciate about the Enneagram is it doesn't feel necessarily like you're stuck. They really emphasize on, health and really getting to a healthy place in whatever type you are.
Yes, exactly. And it helps, like, I think the reason I love the Enneagram as well is because it helps like normalize I think some of those growth points and some of those things that we can perceive as weaknesses, it helps understand and normalize, like, oh, okay, I'm experiencing this, or I feel this way in relationship, and I can wrap language around it, maybe in a way that I couldn't before. And I think that's why a lot of people are gravitating towards the Enneagram, is because it helps them put words to their experience, maybe in a new way. It's like understanding and normalizing like what life is for them.
Totally, totally. So, okay, I have to ask.
Yes.
Do you know your Enneagram type?
Yes, I am a 9. I am the peacemaker. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And my sister is a 9. So I love that. I think what's super cool about the Enneagram is, they talk through childhood wounds and different things, and really things that we all experience and emotions that we all experience. But basically, it's just saying that your specific type experiences this one maybe more so than everyone else, and it's really more about that, right? So yeah. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram.
Yes.
Which is the individualist, or the romantic. It's just the one that's, kind of dramatic, a little more.
You just feel things bigger, which is such a beautiful gift.
So much bigger. Empathy is like 1,000%. Yes, so you just feel things deeper. And so it's basically saying, you're feeling all the same things that all the other types are feeling, but somehow you just feel things on like a higher level than other people do. So, I think it's really helpful. And we talked about this earlier, but just talking through, what we're like in stress, what we're like when we're, stable, what we're like when we're really healthy. And I think that's what's really cool about the Enneagram is that if you look at the graph for the Enneagram, it's all connected, right? So the little graph thing, everything is connected. So when I'm healthy, I move to a 1. When I'm unhealthy, I move to a 2. And I think that's cool too, because you're not being put in a box. You're really just kind of like moving around, depending on where you're at. And, we all have parts of or traits of other numbers in us,
Exactly. Yeah. I love that, Tori. And I think that that's like, another reason why it's such a helpful tool, right? Because then we can see and appreciate and understand the strengths in other people as well, right? As we can like move around and identify with these different aspects of like how God made us, and I think it's fun to be able to notice that even in others. And it's a great way to like build community and spark conversations. Like I remember when I first learned about the Enneagram, I made my husband take the test, even though that's not quite his cup of tea. He took it to humor me because he's a nice human and I love him dearly. And he, like, it was just really fun sparking that conversation with him, where he could go through and kind of read his result. He was a 5. He's a 5. Mm-hmm. And he, true 5 fashion, was like, I don't like being put in a box, right? Which was funny. But like going through with him and like reading his responses and having him speak to it, like, oh yeah, that definitely fits for me, or no, that completely doesn't, was a really fun connecting conversation between us. Just like, what is true, what isn't true for you, because like I think with all of these personality tests, it's not the end all be all of what's true about us, right? It's a tool to help us grow. It's a tool to help us understand ourselves and other people. And so it's helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when I first started looking at the Enneagram, probably like 2 years ago, maybe, I don't even know. But when I figured out, the types of like he was my boyfriend at the time, and family members and stuff, I just was like, oh my gosh, I want to know what everybody's type is and all of this stuff, because I realized that it helped me love people better. I realized that I was noticing, when my sister, who's a 9, pulled away, it was because of, something like a conflict or something intense that I might have said. And so it ended up helping me kind of love people better and know them better, but then also know how I needed to be loved. And even just pick up on like, oh, I'm feeling this right now. Where did that come from? just the self-awareness, the mindfulness,
Yeah.
which, you don't need to know your Enneagram type to do that, but it helps a lot.
Yes, it so does. And I think it's so good. Like it's another example of like using that as a tool to help
Right.
understand yourself, understand people you're in relationship with. And so it's so helpful. It's so much fun.
Just love being able to know people better, know myself better. I think it's super cool. And honestly, it's been neat to even learn about my husband, and our marriage and how that kind of comes together and our types and all of that. But, at the end of the day, of course, you don't need to know your Enneagram type, right?
Exactly.
But why not? It's helpful, and it's a cool way to learn more about yourself and loving others well. And so I guess lastly, how could that kind of correlate with counseling? So, you have your job and what you do and how you pour into people. So how could knowing someone's type maybe help you or help them?
Yeah. So I think it's a really great resource. And it's something that like as a therapist, I'm not gonna make anybody take that test or anything like that. But if it's something that they're coming in with and that's a way that they understand themselves, then I think it's really, really helpful for them to just conceptualize just more about their personality and who they are and how they relate to other people. And I think for me too, like knowing the things that I do know about the Enneagram, if someone's coming in saying like, oh, I'm a 2, then it can kind of like put me in a place where I'm more aware of maybe if they're getting into an unhealthy place. It just gives me more data. It gives me more information
Yeah.
as a therapist if they come in with that information already.
I think that's a cool way to put it, data, like,
Yeah.
and obviously, everyone's different, right? So it's not like, someone who is a 2 is going to act like this person who's a 2. We all have different personalities and different hearts and all of that. But, it is cool. It's cool data to be able to know, what this person responds to, or, kind of those inner motivations that are really key in the Enneagram. So it is neat. So that's super cool. I love that you are knowledgeable about it because I get excited about it. So talking to a counselor who knows a lot about it is fun for me.
Good. Yes. I know you seem to know quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an enthusiast. I'm not gonna lie. I've read quite a few books on it.
Hey, that's
I love
awesome.
it. I think it's so interesting, and I've seen it in my own life, just kind of how having that awareness in myself has made a difference.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yes, it's so fun. It's so helpful. I think it's such a great resource, and I love even like getting Christian perspectives on some of that as well. I think it's really fun how it like more information on how we get to reflect the image of God in the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are good with that. That's awesome. I love it. And I hope that people watching are excited and go and look into it because it's really cool. Go on, read all the types and kind of, figure out, what you might be thinking. And it's really cool. So I love that. We're going to jump into some questions, some Q&A. You guys, if you're watching right now, watching live, watching the replay, we love being able to answer your questions here. This is a safe place for you to ask your questions and not be named specifically. So, I really want to emphasize that we love answering your questions and we try to get to all of them in future videos. So feel free to comment if you're more comfortable inboxing us. Go for it. We're not going to be sharing your information. So go for that, or go to MyCounselor.Online/ask and submit there. But we love answering your questions. And I'm going to dive into this first one, which we got from our online form. And this is from a mom who says, my son is 12 years old, and I noticed that he's watching porn videos. I'm very upset and I'm unsure on how to counsel him. Will you kindly guide me? So, Allison, from your perspective as a Christian counselor, what would your response be to this mom asking this question?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I so sympathize with her. That's so uncomfortable for a parent, not only that like you're seeing your little baby grow up and change and experience all these like hormones and drives that he's not used to. It's just, you want your kids to foster their sexuality well, and so it can be so uncomfortable. So I feel for that mom. That's so challenging. It's so challenging.
Yeah, I really can't imagine being in that situation. I mean, I may be in that someday, but, I really can't imagine being in a situation like that. I think of even myself, when I was a teenager and started being exposed to things like that, and how it affected me, but, how it would affect a parent.
I know. And especially because pornography is so pervasive, like it's everywhere. Sexual content is everywhere right now. And so I just feel for parents, there's like so much to protect against in the current climate. But first off, I think for that mom, the first thing that I would say would be to, as best you can, normalize the sexual urges that her son is experiencing, right? What we don't want to do is shame that child into thinking that his sexuality is a bad thing, because it's not. It's designed by God to be good. And so to come alongside her son and to correct behavior, because we don't want him getting addicted to pornography or like having that be a coping skill that he uses. So to come alongside him and talk about like respecting other people's bodies, respecting women, respecting men, and saying like those things are private, those things are meant for just a husband and a wife behind closed doors. Like they're not meant for us to watch. Like that's not okay. That's not respectful. We want those boundaries to be in place for him, right? That he understands why that's not okay, because it violates God's view of sex and sexuality. But then to also affirm like, yes, your hormones are changing. Yes, you have these desires. Yes, it feels good when you touch yourself, right? Like that feels good. You have a lot of nerve endings in your body in that area. And to just normalize that feels good and that it's supposed to feel good. That's how God designed it. But that there's a time and a place to engage with that kind of a behavior, right? So that you're affirming his sexuality and not shaming him for that, but you're also coming alongside him and providing a healthy, godly view of how to engage with that and how to use that.
That's great advice. And, she kind of mentioned, I don't know if I said this, but that he's watching it when he's alone, which, of course is typical, but, how do you kind of fight against that? Because, a mom can say that, but, the urges come later on and the kid's alone and things like that. So like that happening when they're alone.
Oh my gosh, such a great question. I know that's so hard because like I said, it's pervasive. It's pervasive. So one thing I will say is there is a lot of different like softwares out there that help protect against specific content being loaded or viewed. So there's things like Covenant Eyes that you can look into and get and download onto your son's devices, laptops, phone, tablets, whatever he has access to, so that there is a filter that it doesn't let some content go through, or it sends kind of like a little warning to whoever has control over the filtering software that's happening, that behavior is being engaged with, that certain things are being watched. So I think that's a great resource for parents to put those barriers, put those protections on technology. There's also different softwares and apps you can get that put timers on different applications on their devices. So you can make it so that like you can't access certain things like web browsers at certain times of day. So like anything past like 10 p.m. through like 6 a.m. you can't access those things.
Right, because I would say, when you're just kind of surfing online for a long period of time, like it's much easier probably to come across some content that you shouldn't be seeing.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of apps these days have kind of like these backdoor sketchy things. So I think it's just also being aware of what your kid has on their phone, like what your child is exposing themselves to, and just doing a little research of what is here, what's available to them through that app. And then having a conversation. I'm always a big fan of actually talking to your kids and having open dialogues with them about some of the stuff, like why it's happening, why you're doing it, why it's important to you, just so it doesn't feel like punishment for the sake of punishment, right? We don't want it to be punitive, because parents want to set these things up for their kids because they care about them and they want to protect their little hearts and their little minds, right? And as parents, like, you have more wisdom and knowledge and experience, you know better, right? So just sharing that wisdom with your kids, like as you put those parameters in place, I think is also helpful. Whether they get it now, hopefully they understand it and appreciate it later.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think, that last part, you're talking about honesty and just transparency in those conversations. I've talked with some of the other counselors when questions like this have been asked before, because this is a question we get because it is very common. So to this mama, you're not alone in that situation. Like, this does happen quite often. And, something I hear from a lot of counselors is, of course, it's okay if this has never been an open conversation, and that can change, and we can start that. But it's so important just from a young age for kids to understand their bodies and understand what's not appropriate for someone to touch, what's not appropriate for you to see, things like that. Just how important that is from a very young age to be an open conversation with parents.
Yes, exactly. And then you're opening that door, like, as that kid continues throughout life, and it won't be the last time that he's exposed to sexual content in the world, right? So you're opening up that dialogue so that as he goes through junior high, high school, all the conflicting messages that kids get these days about sex and sexuality, that door has been opened, and that he'll feel hopefully safe coming to talk to the parents, talk to the mama about what's going on inside of him.
Yeah. Hopefully that is an encouraging answer to the mom who asked this, and know that you're not alone, and that this is something that happens a lot, and there are resources for you to be helped and be encouraged, but you're doing a good thing. And I just appreciate the heart of that question. I appreciate that mom just was like, please guide me. Like, what do I do? Like, you didn't just find out and just kind of push it aside. You care about the safety of your child and the safety of their mind. So I think that is just a really beautiful thing, a really mom's heart to see, So we're going to ask this last question before we kind of wrap things up. And this is kind of an intense question, but I think it's an important one. And I think it's something that a lot of other wives have experienced. So this person said, I'm trying to forgive my husband for having a long-term emotional affair, but I have no idea how to trust and move forward.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a hard situation to be in.
Right. I even think of just an emotional affair, right? So it's like not physical, so it almost feels like sometimes I feel like I would experience that and think I'm being dramatic, like, because there was nothing that happened, right? But there was.
Yes. Nothing that happened.
Right.
Yes. Oh my gosh, because it feels so violating, right? And that's why those things are so damaging and so hard to move past, because it's like, wait, now do I have to be like hyper vigilant about all relationships, right? Like, there's so much fear in that, right? Because now you're like, wait, who are you talking to? What does that mean? You're going to work? I'm not with you when you're at work. Are there women that you work with? Like, it just brings like your defenses way, way up.
Right.
That's so,
especially as women, I think, we already, a lot of times, I mean, men too, but I think of myself and, the insecurities that I have, I think that just brings them to the surface. Cause you're like, why does this person have that I don't have, and I mean, you could say that with a physical affair, an emotional affair, all of it, I think that it just really brings insecurity to the surface.
Oh my gosh, of course. I know I try to put myself in that position. I was thinking about what that would be like, and I know that would be something I would 100% be struggling with as well. Something that I will say in terms of like trying to build trust back up because it's so hard. First, it takes so long to do that, right? Like Brene Brown talks about the marble jar. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but how building trust is like putting a marble in a jar, and it's going to take a lot of marbles before that jar is full, right? And so it's just slowly letting that build and slowly like letting your husband do, hopefully he's doing the next right thing. Hopefully he's being transparent, right? And that if you have that thought, if you have that fear, if you have that little inkling, like ask, right? Don't let that fear, don't let that inkling, don't let that trigger fester, because then that jar is never going to get full, you know, because then you can't let him show that he's doing the next right thing, you know?
Right, because then you're always stressed, you're always anxious.
Exactly. And I think too, like for that sweet woman, that's such a hard situation, making sure that both she and her husband have like good people in their corners outside of their marriage that they can talk to.
Right, because that's something that, I mean, you can't walk through alone. You can't.
No, and you're not meant to. And there's some of the feelings that come up in situations like that are so big and so heavy. And especially like if you're the betrayed spouse, if you're the one like who feels so betrayed, there's a lot of anger there, right? And not all of that anger needs to get poured out onto your spouse, right?
Right. We were just talking about anger, and
yes,
that's not, you know, a super healthy thing always.
yes, that in this context, right? Like it's valid. Like
right.
it's normal. Like, of course you'd be angry, just like how God was angry when the Israelites would worship other gods. It's the same kind of anger because God describes his relationship with the Israelites as his bride, right? So there's a lot of overlap between a marital relationship and our relationship with God. And so that anger is like healthy because that relationship shouldn't have been there.
Right. Because your marriage relationship is so sacred and so important and foundational, you know?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I would encourage her to get a person, at least one in her corner that's safe, that's not going to broadcast her business, right? That loves her and her husband, I think is another important thing. A lot of times if we talk to family, they're biased kind of in one direction or another because they love us, and that's a good thing, but having someone in your corner that loves you and
you want someone championing your marriage, not just you know?
Exactly. And even getting professional help in some of those situations, because it can feel like I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to begin here, you know, and so getting some professional help, someone who's walked through infidelity with couples before so that they can just help you, like that couple specifically is what they're dealing with,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully that was an encouragement to the person who asked this question. But that is it. That's all she wrote. That's all we've got for today. And I have really enjoyed being able to talk with you. I think that you are just so wise and so eloquent. I love getting to talk with you, honestly. We were talking before we went live, and Allison was saying, you know, she's just going to kind of, you know, conversate and doesn't have it all written down in front of her. And I was like, wow, like, I love that because it really does make it more like a conversation between us, because I really am asking genuine questions that I have. So I love it. I think it's awesome. And Allison, I have just so appreciated your time. So to the people watching, thank you for joining us. And we will be back next week with another episode of My Counselor Live with another counselor. So definitely tune in next Wednesday and we will see you then. So thank you so much, Allison, again.
Yes, thank you, Tori. I always enjoy talking with you.
All right, see you guys later.